Hey everyone, you're watching We Had That, and today I'm going to talk about the 1979 Draco action figure from the Buck Rogers and the 25th Century line by Mego. The unexpected massive success of Star Wars in 1977 led to a huge surge of science fiction movies, TV shows, and books. Along with the popularity of the movie, Kenner's 3 3/4-inch Star Wars figures had quickly become the most in-demand toy of the late 1970s. Toy manufacturers scrambled to get a piece of the sci-fi pie. Mego, who had missed out on the license for Star Wars, didn't want to make the same mistake twice, so they seemed to jump on any license that came their way, science fiction or otherwise. They ended up making action figures for everything from Star Trek the Motion Picture to the Dukes of Hazzard and superheroes, and even the Love Boat. It was around this time that Mego was offered the license to manufacture toys for the reboot of the Buck Rogers franchise. The Buck Rogers character was created by Philip Francis Nowlin almost 100 years ago, way back in 1928, in the story Armageddon 2419 AD, which was published in the August 1928 issue of a pulp magazine called Amazing Stories. Buck's adventures were adapted into a syndicated comic strip starting the next year in 1929. The Buck Rogers comic strip was so popular that it inspired many other stories about space heroes, the most famous of which was probably Flash Gordon, whose comic strip debuted in 1934. In 1932, Buck's adventures were brought into homes across America in the form of a radio program. In 1939, Universal Pictures got the rights to produce a 12-chapter film serial starring Buster Crabbe. In the late 1970s, the success of Star Wars motivated a lot of people to finance sci-fi endeavors, and I'm confident that the early success of Buck Rogers, combined with the recent success of Star Wars, is what motivated the willingness to spend $3.5 million on the 1979 Buck Rogers movie. Although the toys for Buck Rogers in the 25th Century didn't achieve the popularity of Star Wars toys, it wasn't because Mego didn't try. While many companies were only releasing a handful of figures to test the waters with their new lines, the Mego Buck Rogers line had an unusually large first wave of 9 3 3/4-inch figures. The packaging cards that they were mounted on all had the same artwork, which saved them some money, but still the tooling cost for 9 different characters could not have been a small investment. There were also several vehicles and a playset made specifically for the line. Also, while Star Wars figures only had 5 points of articulation, the Buck Rogers figures offered a much wider range of motion. Mego also put money into advertising with ads and even commercials on TV. Although Buck Rogers had been around since the 1920s, this new movie, and particularly the TV show, offered us an updated version of the character that we could only have seen in the late 70s and early 80s. It's almost as if the creators of the show said, "We're going to combine the two hottest things in the world right now, science fiction and disco music." It wasn't just the music, but the fashion as well. The costumes consisted of more sequins, boas, and metallic spandex than any other show on TV at the time. On the other hand, the action figures weren't so garish. There were no metallic colors, and the paint applications were kept to a minimum, which meant in many cases the figures were almost entirely one solid color with only a few painted-on details. It's no surprise that Mego made figures for Buck Rogers and his robot sidekick Twiki. Of course, you need a couple of bad guys like a Draconian Guard and Tiger Man or maybe Killer Kane, but I am surprised the line included not one, but 2 female characters. Making female characters at the time was something that most boys' toy lines avoided. Possibly the biggest surprise was the figure of Emperor Draco. Emperor Draco was known as the Conqueror of Space, Warlord of Astrium, ruler of the Draconian realm, which includes 75% of the known galaxy, and the part was played by Joseph Wiseman, whose biggest role was probably Dr. No from the James Bond series. All of that should be impressive, right? He also has 30 daughters. Now that's impressive. One of his many daughters was Princess Ardala, who was one of the main villains in the movie. All of this makes it sound like Mego definitely should make an action figure for this guy. But in reality, the character of Draco only appeared in one short scene of the entire movie, which lasted less than a minute, and even then, only as a hologram yelling at Kane. Sure, Ardala and Kane talked about this guy throughout the movie, but when you have a line of 9 figures, it's odd that one of them is some old dude in pointy shoes who had 35 seconds of screen time. Then again, who would they have made instead of him? Mego actually did a pretty good job of making action figures for just about everyone in the movie who had any dialogue. The action figure of Draco was kind of neat, I guess. He looked a little bit like the character in the movie. He was given gray hair instead of brown, and Mego didn't include his crown on the 3 3/4 inch figure. It was included on the 12-inch figure. He had a yellow Star Wars style cape, but it was made with cloth instead of vinyl, so it started to fray right when it came out of the package. He had 2 unpainted molded on necklaces on his chest and a molded on sash around his waist that matched the color of his pointy shoes. Like the rest of the figures in the line, he came with no accessories. The 12-inch figure was much more movie accurate than the 3 3/4 inch figure. He may not have been the coolest figure in the line, but I did have him as a kid and I do remember playing with him. He mostly just sat around yelling at people from back at his base, but I guess it's good to have a figure to cover that job. When it comes to the Buck Rogers movie, I really can't think of any characters that Mego left out who they should have made instead of Draco. Maybe Buck Rogers in his NASA spacesuit? But there were definitely some characters from the TV show that would have been cool to have. Overall, I think Mego did a pretty good job with this line. Did you collect any of the Buck Rogers action figures as a kid? Do you collect them now? Which character was your favorite? Please tell me in the comments. Also, please give this video a like and share it on social media. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe to my channel and hit that notifications bell so that you'll be notified when I post new videos. And one last thing, if you're a fan of toys, you should know about ToyLanta, the biggest toy show in the southeastern United States, held annually just north of Atlanta, Georgia. Visit ToyLanta.com for more information. As always, thanks for watching.